After failing to have her arrest and deportation from Tanzania declared unlawful and set aside by the Free State High Court, Dr. Magudumana and her legal team have filed an application for leave to appeal that decision. In her application, Magudumana claims that there are reasons that warrant and grant that leave to appeal. Senior reporter Silindelo Masikane has been following the story and joins us to unpack some of the developments in this particular story. So very good afternoon to you, Slee. Very interesting times that you are living in indeed, and welcome to Johannesburg. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So I mean, let's talk about some of the developments around her fight to freedom. We saw what unfolded in the courts, and now her legal team is going to be taking further action. But what is the very latest around that?
So of course this week we saw more developments around the Thabo Bester escape saga. In particular, we were expecting judgment in Dr. Nandipa's application to have her arrest as well as legal proceedings against her declared unlawful and set aside. We heard arguments just about 2 weeks ago from legal teams representing the state as well as Dr. Nandipa. She brought in international law senior counsel Anton Katz, who in essence then told the Free State High Court that this deportation that South Africa believes it was part of in terms of bringing back the pair was actually an extradition. They argued on the fact that Magudumana, one, did not consent, and of course she claims that in fact she was arrested by South African police in Tanzania. Now the Judge Philip Lopse, then reserved judgment and was going to deliver it this week on the 5th of June. So that judgment, of course, was then delivered, and in his judgment, Judge Philip Lopse, in essence, agreeing with Nandipa's lawyers that, listen, this does look like a extradition disguised as a deportation. However, in his judgment, he says that she consented to being brought back, basically, and she can't now come to South Africa and try and argue that her deportation was unlawful. Now, 2 days later, on the 7th of June, we then saw Dr. Nandipa's legal team filing papers to appeal this particular judgment, and in essence they are appealing on the basis that the court says that she consented to this. Firstly, she's going to argue that, one, she didn't consent, two, was it informed consent, and her legal team also believes that the judge used case law that predates the Constitution to justify dismissing her application, and they say that this is not in line with, of course, what was set out in the Constitution by using case law that was, that was ruled on before, the Constitution was put into effect in South Africa. So her legal team is now, of course, awaiting a date in terms of whether or not this appeal will be heard and whether Judge Lopse will grant the appeal, because if he doesn't, then I think her legal team will certainly then go straight to the SCA to try and petition an appeal on her behalf. So we had an opportunity to get some legal analysis in terms of the prospects of success in this application. Let's take a listen to what they had to say.
And obviously one needs to look at the consent that was given. And they said that she gave consent, and that consent, in terms of the Vienna Convention, Article 36 of the convention, says it must be informed consent. I think that she now stands a very strong chance at the SCA to actually get success, given that the judge already in his judgment made these fact findings against Department of Home Affairs, NPA, and SAPS pertaining to this disguised extradition.
In as much as the judge says in a dictum, he is of the opinion that this may indicate a very problematic extradition disguised as deportation. I think that raises a serious constitutional issue on the side of government. But her intentions were clear, that I think to challenge the arrest was for her to prepare for her defense. And
now, obviously, this has been the case that keeps on giving with the developments that have come around Thabo Bester, his escape, and thereafter. But a shocking development that occurred was the death of one of the senior investigating officers in this particular case. Tell us about his role in this case and what happened.
So we're still trying to unpack, still trying to uncover exactly what could have led to this tragedy. The death of Brigadier Jackson Mkhawulesi came literally hours after the delivering of that judgment on the 5th of June. And from what we understand, he was in court that morning. From speaking to those who interacted with him on that day, from what we understand, he seemed a bit emotional, in fact, on that particular day. And we know that he is not only the head of organized crime in the Free State, but formed part of the investigating team into Thabo Beste's escape. And of course, speculation is going to be rife around the circumstances of his death. We're still not too sure. And from what we've heard from the police, they have ruled out foul play at this stage, to say that this does seem as though Brigadier Jackson Mkhawulesi took his own life. The reasons behind that at this stage are still unknown. But from speaking to some of those who knew him, some people who were around him on this day, they did tell me that he did seem quite, emotional. At some point, he was crying and then left the courthouse in a hurry. And then a few blocks away from the courthouse, we understand that is where he stopped his car and shot himself, and of course leading to his death. So at this point, the police have said that they are still investigating, but the initial preliminary report does not show that there was any foul play. But I think South Africans at this point are still speculating as to, was he pushed, was he coerced, or whether this was really just something he was dealing with in terms of his own financial or personal issues that he may have been facing. We do know that he had applied for an early retirement within the police service. We understand that application may have been dismissed. And so that may have been, one of the reasons perhaps that could have pushed him. But I think him being one of the lead investigators in this case, it does raise a lot of suspicion around, what could have led to this. So let's just take a listen to what the police commissioner had to say around the circumstances of the Brigadier's death.
At the moment, the preliminary indications are that there is no foul play. The member committed suicide. Yes, we are aware as subs that he did apply for early retirement, but as to why he took his life, we cannot at this stage preempt as to what was the reason.
So, of course, we've heard from the police commissioner there, and of course, as you say, speculation will remain rife. We've also heard from Pop Crew, who've reacted to the death of the Brigadier. What is it that they have communicated to you in this instance?
Well, of course, sending their condolences to the family, but also saying that the issue of mental health within the South African Police Service is not really taken as seriously as it should, that police officers do need support, and that, in fact, a death like this one is not something that is foreign within the South African Police Services, but that, of course, the death of this Brigadier in particular, in terms of his role as a detective, in terms of being the head of organized crime, in terms of forming part of that investigating team, this is obviously going to be a huge loss for the South African Police Services. Let's take a listen.
And of course, we know that the SAPS has been losing such rare skills over the years with seasoned investigators leaving the service. So this will definitely have an adverse impact on the kind of work that they used to do.
Very interesting developments around this case indeed. And of course, you're no longer a Joe Burger for the foreseeable future. We do understand that you are heading back. What is set to happen this week?
Yeah, we are expecting some proceedings in terms of memorial services for the Brigadier. And of course, we are still expecting to hear whether or not that appeal for Dr. Nandipa will be heard perhaps sometime this week.
Thank you very much, Silindelo Masikane. She's the senior reporter that has been following the developments around the best escape, Thabo Beste, Dr. Nandipa Magudumana, and all the associations they've had with various people with NG4S and otherwise to live freely, even if it was for a short while.